jacket smelled like her. Not perfume, not fabric softener, something underneath all of that. Something warm and specific that I couldn't name but recognized instantly as not my husband's. I stood in the middle of our closet with his old winter coat in my hands, the one he'd asked me to donate months ago, and I kept forgetting, and I just stood there, breathing, my brain trying to catch up with what my nose already knew. It was a Saturday morning in late October. My husband, we'd been married 4 years, was downstairs making coffee. I could hear the grinder, that familiar shriek of it, and the smell of dark roast drifting up through the floorboards. Everything was exactly the way Saturday mornings were supposed to be. Quiet, ordinary, safe. I almost put the coat back. I don't know what made me check the pockets. I checked his pockets 100 times before, for receipts, for chapstick, for the earbuds he was always losing. It wasn't suspicion. It was habit. Muscle memory. I slid my hand into the left pocket and felt the lining and nothing. And then I moved to the right, and my fingers closed around something small and hard and rectangular. A phone. A second phone. Not his usual one, which was sitting on the nightstand charging. This one was older, smaller, a prepaid. The kind you buy at a gas station with cash. My heart didn't race. That's the strange thing I remember. It went very, very still. The screen lit up when I pressed the button. No passcode. 43 text messages in a thread with a contact saved only as a single letter, K. The most recent one had been sent at 11,048 the night before, while I was asleep 3 feet away from him. I told her I have an early meeting Monday. We have until noon. I read it 3 times. Then I sat down on the closet floor, just folded right down onto the carpet, coat still in my lap, and I read every single message in that thread, all the way back to the beginning. 7 months. It had been going on for 7 months. My name is Adriana Wells. I am 31 years old. I have a master's degree in public health, a studio apartment's worth of furniture I'd brought into a house that was supposed to be ours, and until that Saturday morning, I genuinely believed my marriage was the one good, solid thing I had built entirely from scratch. I grew up in a family where nothing stayed. I chose my husband because he seemed like someone who stayed. 4 years of evidence supporting that conclusion. 4 years, 7 months of evidence I hadn't seen at all. I heard the coffee grinder stop. The house went quiet. Then his footsteps, and his voice at the bottom of the stairs. "Addie, you want oat milk or regular?" I opened my mouth, closed it. "Regular," I called back. My voice came out completely normal. I don't know how. I took photos of every single text message, every one. My hands weren't shaking. That surprised me too. I was operating in some kind of shock that looked, from the outside, exactly like calm. I put the phone back exactly where I found it. I went to the bathroom and ran cold water over my wrists for 30 seconds because I'd read somewhere that it helps regulate your nervous system. Then I walked downstairs. He was standing at the counter pouring coffee, still in his sweatshirt, hair not combed yet. He looked so familiar it made my chest hurt in a way I didn't have words for. "You okay?" he asked, sliding my mug toward me. "You look pale." "Didn't sleep great," I said. He nodded and went back to his phone. His real phone, the one on the counter, the one I was apparently not supposed to look at either. And I sat across from him and drank my coffee and thought about 7 months, about every trip he'd taken for work, about every early meeting, about the time he'd said he was stuck in traffic for 3 hours on a Tuesday and I'd made dinner and kept it warm and never asked questions because I trusted him. Because I trusted him so completely that the thought hadn't even entered my mind. The thought was in my mind now. I spent that week doing 2 things, acting like nothing had changed and building a case. Not because I wanted to. Because I'd grown up watching my mother get blindsided in her divorce. No documentation, no proof of anything, walked out of a 20-year marriage with almost nothing, and I'd promised myself at 17 years old that I would never be caught unprepared. I didn't know then what I was preparing for. Turns out I was preparing for exactly this. Our finances were shared. That was the first thing I looked at. We had a joint checking account for household expenses, a joint savings account for the down payment we were supposedly building toward, and our own individual accounts. His individual account was something he'd always been private about. Not secretive. Just private. The way some people are. He handled his finances, I handled mine. We split the joint stuff 50-50 and never made it a thing. I had respected that completely. I stopped respecting it. It took me 3 days to find the second savings account, the one I wasn't on, the one he'd opened 18 months ago at a different bank than the one we used together. I found it because I found a paper statement, one single paper statement tucked into a folder in his filing cabinet behind our tax returns, in a section labeled Miscellaneous, $34,000, growing steadily for a year and a half. He was saving money. Separately, in an account I didn't know existed. Eli Andrews' Grexit plan, that was what the man in the video had called his. My husband's version was less organized but no less deliberate. He was building an exit. He just hadn't told me I was being exited. I went back upstairs and sat on the edge of the bed and looked at the ceiling for a long time. Then I got up and called my college roommate Bex. She's a paralegal in Chicago. We've been friends for 12 years. She picked up on the second ring and I said completely flat, I think my husband is planning to leave me. I need to know what I should do right now before he does it. Bex didn't gasp or say, oh my God. She said, okay, listen to me. Don't move anything. Don't confront him. Write everything down. I'm going to give you a name. The name she gave me was a divorce attorney. I made an appointment for Thursday in a building downtown. During a lunch break, I told my office I needed for a dentist appointment. The attorney's name was Margaret Cho. She was in her 50s, sharp, efficient, the kind of woman who has probably seen 100 versions of the same story and has stopped being shocked by any of them. She looked at the photos I'd taken of the texts. She looked at the bank statement. She asked me several questions I answered completely honestly. Then she told me what my rights were. In our state, assets accumulated during the marriage are considered marital property. That savings account, the $34,000 he'd been quietly building, was marital property. The house we'd been renting together for 3 years, the furniture, the car we'd bought jointly, all of it subject to division. She told me to start keeping a log. Dates, conversations, anything that could establish a pattern. She told me not to tip him off. I walked back to my car in the parking garage and sat there for 15 minutes just breathing. Then I drove back to work, answered 14 emails, attended a 3 o'clock meeting about community health initiatives, and came home and made pasta for dinner because it was Thursday and Thursday was usually pasta and I was not going to be the thing that changed. He ate 2 servings, told me it was great, asked about my day. Fine, I said. Busy. The dentist was quick, though. He nodded. He didn't ask what I'd had done. That was the week I started to understand how a person can live 2 lives simultaneously, not comfortably, not without cost, but mechanically. You just keep moving through the motions of the life you're supposed to be living, while something else entirely runs underneath it. He was good at it. He had 7 months of practice on me. I was catching up fast. The breaking point came on a Friday night, 3 weeks after I'd found the phone. He'd been different lately, distracted. He kept checking his phone at dinner, turning the screen slightly away, a habit he'd apparently forgotten I was capable of noticing. He'd started working late twice a week. He'd stopped suggesting weekend plans more than a few days in advance, which sounds minor but was wildly out of character for a man who used to book restaurant reservations 2 weeks out because he hated uncertainty. He was wrapping something up. I could feel it. He was getting ready. That Friday he came home smelling like he'd splashed cold water on his face in a restroom somewhere. Not cologne, just recently cleaned. Freshened up. He kissed my cheek and said he was exhausted and fell asleep on the couch before 9, and I sat in the kitchen with my laptop open to our joint account transaction history, and I saw it. A charge from 3 weeks ago. A jewelry store. $412. I don't own anything new. I looked at my jewelry box. Same earrings, same necklace from my mom, same watch, nothing new. I closed the laptop and went and looked at my sleeping husband on the couch. This person I had chosen, this person I had built a life around, and I felt something inside me go completely quiet and completely cold and completely decided. I was done preparing. I was ready to move. The next morning I did 4 things before he woke up. I transferred my half of the joint savings into my personal account. Not his half, not $1 more than what was mine, exactly 50%, the amount I had contributed, which my attorney had already confirmed I was within my rights to do, given the circumstances and the documentation I had. I set up a separate email account on my phone that he had no access to. I sent the attorney a message flagging the jewelry store charge and asking her to note it, and I texted Bex a single word, ready. Then I made coffee and set out 2 mugs like I always did and waited. He came downstairs at 9:15, saw the coffee, said thanks babe, in that automatic way people do when they haven't quite woken up yet, and reached for his mug. I watched him take the first sip. I thought, you have no idea. That thought didn't make me feel powerful exactly. It made me feel something sadder than that. Something in the range of grief, actually, because whatever was coming, whatever I was about to do, it was going to end something. 4 years. The dinner parties we'd hosted, the road trip we'd taken to the Smokies the summer before last, the night we'd stayed up until 3 in the morning during a power outage, playing cards by flashlight and laughing about nothing. All of it was still real. All of it had happened, and all of it was over. I just hadn't told him that yet. He found out on a Tuesday. I had timed it carefully. My attorney had filed paperwork on Monday. On Tuesday morning I waited until he was settled at his desk in the second bedroom he used as a home office. Door open, coffee beside him, already deep into his email. And I stood in the doorway and said his name. He looked up, smiled, a little distracted. I need you to look at something, I said. I handed him a printed copy of the text thread from the prepaid phone. All 43 messages, the whole 7 months. I watched his face change. It moved through 4 or 5 different expressions in about 2 seconds. Confusion, recognition, calculation, something like fear. His hand tightened on the papers. Addie, I've already spoken to an attorney, I said. My voice was very calm. The paperwork was filed yesterday. I moved my portion of the joint savings last Saturday. You'll receive formal notice in the next day or two. He stood up. You can't just... I've already done it, I said. All of it. You had 7 months. I had 3 weeks. It turns out 3 weeks is enough. He stared at me. Something shifted behind his eyes. Whatever calculation he'd been running, it was failing. He'd had a plan. His plan had a sequence and a timing and a version of me that didn't know anything until he decided to tell her. That version of me no longer existed. Who is she? I asked. Not because I needed to know, not because the answer would change anything, but because I was suddenly aware that after 3 weeks of doing everything right, of being methodical and precise and controlled, I was allowed to ask one question just for myself. He told me her name. I won't write it here. It doesn't matter enough. What matters is what he said next, which was, I was going to tell you. I just needed more time. More time. He needed more time. $412 at a jewelry store, a secret savings account, a burner phone in his coat pocket, 7 months of K. And he needed more time. I picked up my coffee mug from the windowsill where I'd set it. I said, I hope it goes well for you. I genuinely mean that. I didn't. But I said it anyway because I wanted to be someone who could say it, and I figured that was close enough. He moved out that weekend. His brother drove down from Connecticut with the truck, and they loaded the things that were his, which I had inventoried carefully and color-coded with sticky notes, blue for his and yellow for mine, because I needed something to do with my hands during the previous 2 weeks, and also because I was not about to argue about the Vitamix. I kept the Vitamix. Bex flew in for the weekend. We ordered Thai food and drank a bottle of wine, and she slept in the guest room, and in the morning we walked to the coffee place 3 blocks away and sat outside even though it was cold, and she said, How are you actually doing? I thought about it for a real minute before answering. I'm sad, I said, and I'm okay at the same time. She nodded like that made sense. It did make sense. The divorce was finalized 5 months later. The settlement was fair enough, given everything, and my attorney was worth every penny of what I paid her. The $34,000 in his private savings account became relevant to the proceedings in exactly the ways Margaret Cho had told me it would. I won't say I came out ahead, but I came out standing. There's a thing people say about betrayal, that the worst part is not being able to unsee it, not being able to go back to not knowing, and that's true. I cannot unknow any of this. I cannot unknow the weight of that phone in my pocket, or the feeling of looking across a dinner table at someone who is smiling at you with his whole face while planning something you don't know about yet. But I also can't unknow what I'm capable of. I found that in a closet on a Saturday morning, holding a coat that smelled like someone else, that I am the kind of person who doesn't fall apart. who takes photos and writes things down and finds an attorney and makes coffee and waits, who can be devastated and functional at the exact same time, who shows up for herself even when the showing up looks like nothing from the outside. I didn't know that about myself before. I know it now. He wanted more time. I didn't give it to him. That's the part I still feel good about on the hard nights when I'm not sure about much else. I didn't give him one more day than he'd already taken.